Okay, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for taking time out of your day. I'm Lisa Chronister, the Assistant Planning Director, and our team has worked very hard over the last couple of weeks to present today's information in a way that we hope is informative and engaging and designed in a way to really get your feedback. So, I do have some introductory remarks to make before we get into it. This meeting is being recorded, so be mindful of that. And like the first meeting, it will be made available for everybody to view later. If today's video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting will be stopped and reconvened once the audio and/or video connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to Thursday, August 20th at 2 p.m., again via video conference. The agenda and documents for SAT members were located in the Teams folder or in the meeting invitation. And for the public, they were made available on okc.gov. Anyone wishing to speak under public comment, please call area code 405-297-2406 or email mark.misho@okc.gov. That's mark.mishoe@okc.gov. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to comment, and the public comment section is toward the end of the presentation. When you call in, staff will be muting your line. Please keep your lines on mute until you are recognized to speak. This is just for public members, not SAT members. To unmute your phone, press *6. We do ask that all participants keep their lines on mute until they are recognized to speak. Advisory team members will be allowed to ask questions or comment at any time during the meeting. Please remember that only one person can be heard at a time. If more than one person speaks, we will not hear you both. For anyone speaking today, including team members, please identify yourself when you begin to speak. We will not be doing a roll call at various points within the meeting because we're going to be doing some interactive polling that should confirm who is still attending. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order and I'll ask Mark Misho to do the roll call.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Amy Apatone. Allison Berta Bailey.
Here.
Jessica Black.
Here.
Todd Booz.
Here.
Gary Brooks. Andy Burnett. Ophelia Concio. You can hit *6 if you want to turn your microphone on. I thought I saw her earlier. Nathan Ko.
Present.
Jorge Charneco.
Here.
James Cooper.
Present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Scott Cravens. Scott.
I'm present.
Okay. Joel Dixon,
Here.
Jonathan Dodson, Clay Farha,
Here. Here.
Chris Fleming,
Here.
Chip Fudge, Asa Highsmith,
Here.
Julie Hornbeek, Andrew Wang,
Present.
AJ Kirkpatrick,
Present.
Mark Livingston, David Lloyd, Ricardo Montoya,
Here.
Nikki Nice,
Here.
Jim Perrick,
Here.
Emily Pomeroy, Janice Powers,
Here.
Dima Ramadan, Mark Ruffin, Todd Stone,
I'm present.
Tim Strange,
Here.
Bryce Thompson,
Here.
Mark Uday,
Present.
and Mark Zitzow. I'm showing 22 present.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'll also note for the record, we have several members of Oklahoma City staff on the line or in the meeting. Jeff Butler, our planning director, Sarah Welch, and Marilyn Lamensdorf, planners from our current planning division. Mark Michaud, our admin coordinator, Cameron Conyers, another staff planner helping us run the meeting, Susan Randall from the Municipal Counselor's Office, and our consultant team, Mark White, Travis Pendleton, and Reese Wilson. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay, thank you. So our agenda, our concept is we're going to review items 3 and 4, that is recap our first meeting and what we discussed about the sign code approach. We're going to recap those as quickly as humanly possible because we really want to spend, I have budgeted 75 minutes for us to really dig into our sign code approach and to review with you what we have found are the key elements that we need your feedback on. So SAT number 1, it's hard to believe, but that was what, 4 to 6 weeks ago. We talked about why we're here is to address the needs identified by planokc. Everybody on this call is interested in improving efficiency and improving the quality of development. Our work here will address the entire zoning code. We are starting the process with a deep dive into the sign code. I talked about guiding principles. We need to make the right things easy. The code needs to be user friendly, perhaps with graphics. We need to update what we're doing with best practices, make everything clear and simple, and get the best outcomes. We reviewed planokc. If you are not very familiar with it, it is in the Teams folder. It's also available online at planokc.org. Major themes of planokc about transportation choice, about efficient development, community attractiveness, health, both for the environment and its residents. The plan is organized largely around land use typology areas. shorthand Buddhas, and street typologies, the types of streets, about how illustrate how development forms along them. And then we recap the phase one co-diagnosis that team came on site and did a lot of work about where to start in our code, and made some recommendations about the subdivision regs, about the sign standards and nuisance standards. And we also talked about, what is the SAT? Why are they here? What are we asking you to do? We're looking to you guys as technical experts. Everybody in this group has been involved in development, whether that's on the design and engineering end, or the finance end, or the broker end, or the construction end, or the regulatory end. So we need your input. And to further illustrate, shortly after this meeting, we'll present, we hope to present a first draft of the sign code revisions. And to do that, we're going to use all the guiding documents, planokc, we're going to use the code diagnosis, we're going to use stakeholder input that we've received from you, from many focus groups that we got from the policy committee of planning commissioners and city council members that we held several weeks ago. We're going to use our consultants' expertise and practices, and then what staff has researched and analyzed along the way. So all of those things are going to filter into any of the drafts we bring forward to you, and we'll ask for your review before these items are presented to Planning Commission and to City Council. Last time, we also asked everybody to voice something about what they would like to see, what they would like to get out of the process, and how they would like to see the process turn out. And we heard, a lot of people talked about sustainability. A lot of people talked about equity and development. Making things efficient and easy. And I think everybody was pretty unified around this concept of quality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark White, our consultant, and he is going to recap briefly what we talked about as our approach, the general principles to the sign code approach that we talked about at the end of the last meeting. He's going to recap those, and then we're going to launch right into reviewing and discussing some key issues. So Mark, with that, I'll turn it over to you. Wherever you went.
Looks like you're muted, Mark. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Mark White. I'm the project manager for the consultant team, and I'm just going to talk quickly about some of the background, why we're here, and principles for updating the sign code. We begin with planokc, which Lisa mentioned is the city's long-range planning policies, and planokc has some specific things to say about signs, including billboards, one specific policy to reduce or restrict them, to address nonconformities, to consider new signs and how they relate to the scale and function and aesthetics of new development, and to proactively enforce sign regulations. So this city announced in planokc that it's very concerned about the visual impact of signs and et cetera. Well, at the same time, we want a set of regulations that are predictable, easy to read, allow for visible messaging and advertising and so forth. So city also recognizes the value of signs to people who use them. Next slide. And the things we can regulate in a sign code, and again, these are what other communities do. These are things that have been tested and upheld in court decisions and recognized in statutes. We can regulate the dimensions of signs, that's sign area, how big, how tall signs can be, the number of signs on a property or along a street frontage, where signs are located, and we can calibrate those to zoning districts, to neighborhoods, to the land use typology areas, and so forth. So we can be fairly surgical about that to make sure that signs fit in with their context. We can address the type of signs on a property, whether they're attached to a building, whether they're freestanding, and if they're freestanding, whether those are pole signs, whether they're attached to a solid base, which is what's usually referred to as a monument sign, and et cetera. We can address and encourage and even regulate the kind of materials that signs are composed of to ensure that they're compatible with the character of development, with buildings on the site that they're on. How signs are lighted and illuminated. We can address the copy type, whether they're panels like you see there or channel letters like you see on the top. We can address whether signs are animated or not. Most communities that have sign codes don't allow animation. We can allow that to an extent. We can address whether signs are portable and of course, you know, how temporary signs are used on a site. We can address signs in the right-of-way. A lot of communities don't allow signs in the right-of-way unless they're traffic signs or some sort of government signs. And we can set up temporary time restrictions. So, for example, for different types of signs so that people can put them up during an election or a grand opening or something else. So there's a lot of different things we need to look at in deciding what package of regulations best implements Oklahoma City's path for future development. Next slide, please. We, as Lisa mentioned, we had a number of meetings with stakeholder groups, both representing the sign industry, the billboard industry, which are generally off-premise signs, the kind of signs you typically see along a freeway or a highway. We reached out to neighborhood groups, we reached out to business, we reached out to a lot of different groups to gauge their interest in and where they would like to see the city go with its future sign regulations. And heard a number of different things. We mentioned this last week, or at our last meeting. One is to make sure, as with any regulation, that we avoid unintended consequences. The city really wants to make sure that signs are you know, fit in with the character of the development around them, that they're attractive in appearance and so forth. But at the same time, we don't want to hurt business. That's not our intent here. We want to make sure that the permitting process for signs is predictable, it's efficient, that it doesn't take longer than it needs to. We want to make the standards as predictable as possible to avoid uncertainty for businesses. At the same time, allowing for flexibility too, for some common sense modification of standards when they're needed in a way that maintains the integrity of the overall regulations. We want to make sure that the regulations are enforceable. We want to address too how they fit in with other types of regulations. So under the building code, for example, there's electrical inspections. Other provisions of the code address landscaping, and sometimes those things can hold up sign permitting. So we're going to address how those things work in concert with each other as well, and how signs fit in with the plan unit development and simplified plan unit development. That's the PUD and SPUD process, which is not the most efficient way to permit development. And can also result in some unanticipated consequences, not only for applicants, but for neighborhoods, for the city's decision makers and so forth. So a lot of different things we're shooting for in this sign code update. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit. Staff has met, we've heard from you all, taken what we heard at the SAT meeting, some of the, at this point, very global considerations in updating the code as a whole. a lot of the specifics we heard from stakeholder groups, from a policy committee we met with a few weeks ago, and came up with a package of things that we want to test your reaction to in putting these new regulations together. So in the next slide, the first thing we're going to talk about is billboards, and that's the first thing that planokc addresses in its policy on signs. Billboards are obviously beneficial for businesses, especially in what's now a largely auto-dependent city like Oklahoma City. Just like where I live, which is Kansas City, a lot of people use cars to get around. They travel on freeways, and businesses find it useful to advertise. Political candidates find it useful to spread messages, and along with just public interest messages. So billboards do serve a valuable purpose from people, but they also have visual impacts. You know, the billboards spaced too closely together can you know, have an undesirable impact on the city's visual landscape. Too many billboards with too many messages can also be distracting for drivers. So one of the purposes of the regulations is to make sure that they promote traffic safety as people drive around. So a couple of things we've talked about doing in the new sign regulations are, one, to make them easier to administer, and to address recent trends in case law, is to go to a more physical definition to describe billboards as a physical structure, like you see there, a large panel either mounted on a pole or on a you know, on a metal or wooden structure, as opposed to whether it's talking about something on or off site. We also want to limit billboards to freeways and exclude them from scenic highways, from Hefner, the Parkway, the Turnpike, areas that the city would like to leave more open and where it wants to promote the visual landscape. We're also looking at a cap and replace system. This is something a lot of communities have, where if you're limiting billboards, we can allow things like a closer spacing of billboards if a company takes another billboard down. And this, over time, tends to reduce the number of billboards along a highway, which promotes the visual character of a city like Oklahoma City, while at the same time allows them to gradually come into compliance with the city's long-term planning regulations. So this is a technique that a lot of communities around the country use. Billboards right now in Oklahoma City have to be spaced 1,200 feet apart along the same side of the road. We're looking at increasing that to 1,500 feet. But if somebody wants to go back down to 1,200, they can remove another billboard somewhere else. And we're also looking at redefining spacing so that we look at spacing not only on the same side of the highway, but also on the other side of the highway, which again tends to result in fewer billboards along the landscape, but what seems to be a reasonable number today. Next slide, please. We've also looked at best practices in other communities, so because that's the question that always comes up. You know, how do we compare to peer communities? So we looked at about 10 or 12 communities similar in size to Oklahoma City around the country to see how their practices compared to ours and how they compare to the approach that we're looking at now. And we look, when we look at them, most communities limit billboards to least arterials or freeways. In fact, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, or ODOT, regulates billboards along freeways as well. They wouldn't have authority probably to regulate billboards on lower classification streets, but that's where they regulate them as well. So Oklahoma City is very much in line. Our approach is very much in line with what every other community does there. Almost half, about 5 out of 12 of the communities we looked at have cap and replace programs. So this is a technique that's not unheard of. About 10 of them control spacing, as does ODOT. 4 of the communities had spacing requirements that were more than the 1,500 feet that we're talking about here. That includes San Antonio, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Miami. The average of communities that controlled spacing was a little over 1,300 feet. So it's more, it's a larger spacing requirement than what Oklahoma City has in place today. And nearly all of them, 10 of 12 that we looked at, designate scenic areas, as we're proposing to do here, where they either don't allow billboards or have much tighter and tougher spacing requirements. At least 3 of the communities we looked at, Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Omaha, look at billboards on both sides of the freeway and not just one side. So it's probably the minority, but it's still something that's not out of line with what other communities have done in regulating billboards. So next slide. Does anybody, before we go to the polling and then discussions, anybody have any questions about the approach we've laid out here before we move on to the poll?
Yeah, Mark, I'll add. So Mark has presented, information about our approach to the group. So if you have any questions about what he has discussed, if you could ask them now, and then we'll do our poll, and then we'll discuss the poll results on the other side of the poll. But and I can advance to any of the slides, or some of you probably have the presentation pulled up on your screens.
This is Allison Bailey. I have a question. Can you clarify the rules related to the turnpike being a scenic highway and why that is treated differently than I-40 as far as billboards go? And is that currently the case, or is that something that the Turnpike Authority regulates, et cetera?
I don't believe the Turnpike Authority would regulate those, and Lisa or Jeff or any of the staff can jump in if they want. Right now, I don't believe that the scenic highways are treated differently, but these are areas that either today don't have as many, or they're areas where the city has particular interest, either because of long-range planning policies or other considerations for controlling and promoting the visual character of development.
So to clarify, Turnpike, scenic highway, or it is not?
The city, there's only one designated, quote, scenic highway area boundary, and that is on either side of I-40 from between 235 and I-44. It might go a little further, but it's basically I-40, and that's the only designated scenic highway area currently.
I-40 or I-40, like Hefner Parkway is the scenic highway?
No, it is not.
It is not. So I-40 between I-44 and 235
Yes.
running along downtown is considered
Yes.
a scenic highway.
Yeah. And I think it might turn up 235 a little, I don't quite remember.
This is Jeff. There's a lot of people actually think that Hefner Parkway that ODOT has some kind of a some scenic rules in place, but we in our legal department could not turn up anything of the kind, although it's commonly understood that is the case. As far as we can tell, there is not, and the city does not have, as Lisa mentioned, the city doesn't have any kind of special overlay or anything like that on Hefner Parkway.
Hey, Mark, this is Jim Perrick. What would the cap be, and what happens to signs that exist now that are non-conforming under the new rules?
We're still discussing what the exact number would be on the cap. What we're trying to get today is the approach, and to get a sense of what the SAT, what the team thinks about this approach going forward. Some communities are just a 1-to-1. Others are more aggressive. I've seen them up to you got to take down 2 or 3 to put one up, and some vary those by whether you're using a static billboard or an LED or digital billboard. So we could vary the number based on that. So that number hasn't been decided today. We're discussing this as an approach, and then once we get the thumbs up, you know, if that happens, we're going to explore the specific number further.
Mark, this is Chris Fleming, Mark.
Okay.
So will we have a chance to weigh in on what that number is, or is it more, this is just what it's going to be and we just kind of all accept that without discussion?
Yeah, this is Jeff. It definitely will. So we will bring forward the draft document, and like Lisa said earlier, you know, that's this is a technical and an advisory committee, and so that's exactly the kind of feedback we would appreciate from you all.
Perfect, thank you.
This is Janice Powers. I want to go back to this idea of the scenic highways. I don't know whether the distinction that we're making there is between some sort of official governmental designation versus, you know, policies and practices. The Planning Commission has, for as long as I've sat on it, considered that certainly the Lake Hefner Parkway, but other areas in the city. In fact, we had kind of stretched it to the point where it included most of the highway right-of-way because of the desire to put our best face forward for people traveling through the city. And so as part of an effort to sort of clean up the highways and what lines them on either side in terms of land use. But the Planning Commission has long had a practice, until very recently, of treating the highways as areas that require special treatment with respect to billboard placement. And it may be that there's not an official, and I don't know if you're talking about ODOT's official designation of scenic highways versus scenic corridors, but we did in fact consider them to be corridors, beautification corridors, and we were quite adamant about defending them in terms of sign placement. So when you say that we don't have this policy, I think that maybe a little depending on how you look at it. If you're talking about written, you know, ordinance enactment policy, that may very well be true.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say policy. Yeah, I was speaking about an actual zoning area, land use designation boundary. And there's only the one on I-40. In terms of sign code policy in general, yes, there's long been a policy to reduce sign clutter.
Well, I think that it's important that that not kind of get lost in the shuffle there. So thank you for clarifying that.
Hey, Mark, this is Mark Zitzo. Go ahead, Joel.
Thanks, Mark. I just had a couple of, this is Joel Dixon, by the way, a couple of clarifying questions. Number one, on this current slide that's up, slide number 18, we have sort of, I just want to clarify, we're trying to move away from the designation of non-accessory signs and toward the designation of billboard. Is that correct?
Yes, our approach is to get rid of that definition and to define those as a sign that has the structural characteristics that you're looking at there, or that you identify physically with a billboard. So yes, our approach is to get away from accessory versus non-accessory as the specific distinction.
Okay, and then just the second point of clarification, especially based on our whole discussion here on scenic byways. We're talking about this ordinance would only have jurisdiction within the city limits of the city of Oklahoma City, correct? So we're not talking
Correct.
about all of the turnpikes or all of the highways beyond.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mark, this is Mark Zitzow. If I missed this, I apologize, but has an analysis been done on the existing billboards that we have today? Which ones would become non-conforming if this was passed? And then how many billboards would even be permitted in the future under your spacing guidelines that would be new? Has anyone looked at that yet?
Yes, there's about 486 billboards today. Over the city's got 124, almost 125 lane miles of freeway in the city. So roughly right now, that results in a kind of an average spacing of a little over 1,300 square feet. And depending on the freeway, so we looked at Oklahoma City Boulevard, 235, 240, and et cetera. There's probably about 144 billboards that don't have the current requirement for 1,200 linear feet. And so, you know, that leaves a large number, you know, that are beyond that today, but certainly if we increase the number, that's going to bring those down. We haven't looked at that with the 1,500 yet. I don't know how many more that would capture sitting here right now. In looking at across the street, I think I don't know if that's an extra, and I think Marilyn, if you're here, maybe you can add to this. There's 141 that I think would be non-conforming in terms of spacing across the highway if we applied the existing standard. One thing to consider, if we do, if we go with a cap and replace, for example, if you wake up the next day after this ordinance would pass, I mean, things aren't going to change. This all happens over time. What it's designed to do, we're looking long-term with these regulations. Some people will be able to put new billboards in because they'll comfortably meet the spacing, and others, you know, may have to, you know, work with another billboard company or maybe one of their own and remove them to take one up. That doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen all at once. This happens over time. So roughly that's what we're looking at today.
Mark, can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, Ophelia. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, okay, great. I just wasn't sure if you guys could hear me or not. Yeah, this is Ophelia Cancio. I had a question about your spacing requirements. So as far as site distance is concerned, you know, 1,500 usually is for a certain speed limit as far as ODOT and things like that are concerned. Have we considered taking that into consideration for higher speed limit locations for safety as far as drivers are concerned and the site distance?
We haven't talked about varying this by speed limit. We do have a little bit later in the presentation, we're going to talk about sign measurements and regulating signs by street type, which some communities do. And the reason why is exactly what you mentioned here. It's because at higher speeds, signs become larger because, you know, you just need more time to read the sign, to absorb the information, and et cetera. At lower speeds, or when you're in an area like downtown where a lot of people are walking, the signs don't need to be nearly as large. And so for that reason, a lot of street graphics codes and sign codes and a number of communities now tie billboard size or sign size, whether we're talking about billboards or others, to street type.
Yes, I guess I was just you know, thinking about just the safety for drivers at certain speed limits and the amount of information that they are observing. So I don't know if that was something that some other states or cities have done and taken into consideration, you know, the distances between the signs being not necessarily just a standard spacing, but it considering it being regulated by the speed limit if the speed limits are higher for safety reasons.
Okay. Yeah, that's like I said, that's something we're looking at with the overall freestanding sign measurement standards and criteria that we're looking at that, and this would become a form of that kind of sign.
Mark, you had mentioned the OKC Boulevard when talking about I-40, 44. Is the city classifying that as a freeway where billboards are going to be permitted, or is that in reference to existing ones that might already be there?
Jeff or Lisa, do you?
Yeah, I have to look it up. Jeff, do you know off the top of your head?
Well, I can say for sure it's definitely not classified as a freeway. So it would not, you know, it would not have, you know, if we go with this approach, it would not have the ability to have additional billboards. I forget what it was classified in the street topology exactly, but.
Jeff, this is Marilyn in the planning department. It wasn't classified because it was still I-40 under planokc. But that's sort of an example of one you could do with the cap and replace. You could say, you know, we would like billboards removed from here, here, and here, Oklahoma City Boulevard or wherever. And you could remove one from those and then get another one on a highway.
Yeah.
Prioritize. Fort Worth has done it that way, where it kind of in their stockyards area, they wanted to kind of not have so many signs there, so you could put one on the freeway if you took one out of the stockyards.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. And I'll mention we'll be doing a little bit of cleanup concurrently, actually, with the street topology. We're going to be amending the comp plan, just kind of doing some cleanup things, and so we'll take a fresh look at and be updating some of these street types that are needed.
Mark, Janice Powers again. I don't want to get us too far off in the weeds here, but one of the comments that was made just a few minutes ago had kind of got me intrigued. Is there any place that tries to regulate, and the phrase that she used was like the amount of information, that tries to regulate signage based on not content or overall size of the sign, but based on sort of the square footage or square inches of actual lettering and or visual representation the sign contains?
Yes, there's a model sign code that the American Planning Association has promulgated that talks about something called items of information, where you can have up to 8 or 10 items of information in a sign. And an item of information could be something like a word, a number, a logo, something like that. But it does that to make sure that you don't have so much information on a sign that people are, drivers are distracted, have to slow down, or they're weaving across the road because they're trying to take in everything that's on the sign. A lot of communities I work with, and a lot of sign codes I've seen limit a sign, for example, a sign on a shopping center, for example, to like 8 or 10 tenants, so that, you know, and then that's up to whoever's managing the shopping center, whoever's managing the development, gets to decide, and I'm sure they negotiate with each other to decide who puts their name on that sign. And smaller businesses would just have a, you know, a wall sign or something like that. So there's a tenant limit and an items of information limit, which I think works better under principles of content neutrality. And it's flexible. I mean, whoever has the sign can decide whether that's a word, a number, or something else, and whether that relates to a tenant or maybe some other item of communication they want to present on the sign.
Have we given any thought to that approach?
That hadn't been discussed. It hadn't come up in any of our meetings yet, but now it has.
Have you found it to be fairly workable in other places?
Yeah, I've seen other communities have done that fairly successfully. I'm doing a sign code update in the Denver area right now where there's some discussion. They allow, I think, 6 or 8, and the business community has suggested they need more. A lot of the community people in the community have said keep it the way it is. So we're kind of going through that discussion right now, but it's been fairly common, has seemed workable. I haven't heard of any adverse consequences specifically from any of the communities that have done that. So,
Mark, this is Jeff. Is that so? Do they regulate these items, these informational items? Is that in addition to, or in lieu of, like a square footage requirement or height or something?
In addition to.
Okay.
This is Allison Bailey. I would not be in favor of that idea at all, limiting the number of tenants on a single sign. But that is actually not the question I was going to ask. I just felt like I needed to share that. I want a clarification on this slide that we're on right now. Under approach, it says allowed on freeways, excluding scenic highway, Hefner Parkway. So does that mean only allowed on freeways or also allowed on city streets? And kind of what are the regulations about the city streets if that is allowed on there?
The approach here would only allow what you're looking at on the images there on freeways. On city streets, on local collector, other arterial streets, etc. You could also have a freestanding sign, but it would be a monument sign. It would be smaller. It wouldn't be a panel type sign like you see there. And then we're going to talk a little bit later about pole signs and about measurement and what we're planning to do on those. But you could have freestanding signs on the other streets, just not, what's identified, I think, in most people's minds as a billboard.
Okay, so it seems like then we're kind of basing where we're allowing it and where we're not allowing it based on the vehicular use and use of the street. So I'm surprised that turnpikes are excluded from allowing billboards since they're basically built with a completely auto-centric design in mind. It seems prime for billboards as compared to some of the other locations that these would be restricted from.
Yeah, sorry about that. This is Jeff. Yeah, we weren't necessarily, I think in my mind at least, and when to me you're right. There's very little difference between a turnpike and a freeway. It's really just who administers. But the thinking there was there are already sections of the turnpike that are kind of billboarded up. And there are sections of the Kilpatrick Turnpike that are not. And the thinking there was that we would identify sections of the turnpike that are scenic, kind of like Hefner Parkway.
Okay, I would object to that. So to me, if you're building a road of that type, then all of them, other than things that are truly scenic, like maybe Lake Hefner, there's nothing scenic about the turnpikes that we build in Oklahoma. So from my perspective.
We're talking about the scenic, for example, like the Kilpatrick Turnpike, the west side of it that goes through a lot of wetlands and so forth. I would consider that to be scenic. There are other areas of the turnpike that I can think of. And when we say scenic, we're not necessarily talking about, the area I just described, Lake Hefner, for example. You can see the lake and you can see the landscaping and so forth. The west end of Kilpatrick, which, there are many miles of that are in Oklahoma City, would be kind of scenic from that perspective. But a lot of people just don't like the visual impact of billboards, even in urban areas. So, and I think that's the case for a lot of people, even on the, you know, on the Hefner Parkway, or yeah, Hefner Parkway, even on the east side, for example, where it's really neighborhoods, you're not necessarily looking at a lake. So that's kind of the perspective that, and when I say we, the royal we, you know, not just me, I think that we're trying to get out there. I think that we're hearing from focus groups and people in general. Does that clarify kind of where we were coming from?
Yeah, it does. I would like a more quantitative approach than, you know, well, it's ag land right now, so it's going to be in this category, and we're, you know, a few years away from it being housing developments and a Starbucks out there too. So I would like a more quantitative approach to that that designation, especially if we're saying that other types of streets are not going to be permitted to have billboards on them. So I'm probably out of, and it may be a surprise, I don't have strong objections to billboards. So I feel like if we're going to say, okay, these are meant for auto-centric roads and these are meant to be advertisements for the upcoming Whataburger that you could exit on the next highway exit for, then we need to say that they're acceptable in the areas that that's appropriate.
That's a good point. I think that was our intent, is to, you know, if this group is, if we proceed with this general approach, then we would identify, you know, those areas that we think are kind of scenic or for whatever reason are worth preserving. In other words, worth keeping the scenery the way it is. Then we would come back to you as part of the draft, and you would see a map and how we came up with those. So yeah, that's definitely the intent.
This is Joel Dixon. I think a flip side to that argument could be, though, that, you know, if you're paying to use the road, could not some of what you're paying for be not to be distracted or have visual clutter from that road? Not saying that that is the right reason or a good reason, just as a flip side argument to why we might want to designate the turnpikes as being freer of visual clutter, such as billboards.
That's a thought.
Any other questions about the billboard approach?
Will we be seeing a sign, or I'm sorry, a map of all the signs in the community at some point?
We do have a, Maryland did some great maps of all the existing billboards. And as you were talking, I was looking for them. I couldn't immediately find them, and I didn't want to kill my presentation trying to find them, but we'll post those in the Teams folder.
Oh, Lisa, this is Asa Highsmith.
Yeah.
I wanted to chip in and say that I think Allison's comments probably reflect my own thoughts on this topic pretty well. I know that some of my fellow commissioners disagree, and honestly, like I'm open to I guess the idea that billboards themselves are somehow nefarious, but I need somebody to show me that, I guess, if I'm going to be on that side. But otherwise, I really feel like the quantitative approach is exactly the tact we should take, because it seems like instead we're, you know, almost, it's not arbitrary, but, you know, in some respects it does feel that way where we make these designations. But anyway, I just wanted to say I agree with
Asa and Allison, let me when you say a quantitative approach, are you referring to like a you know, certain speeds or something, or certain amounts of development that are nearby, or?
Yeah, I could see that being triggers, like, you know, just something that defines it clearly, and if that's the circumstances, that's what the code is. I just feel like if we don't like billboards so much, you know, what stops us as a city from just saying no more billboards? We seem to be somewhere in the middle.
Well, nothing stops us from saying that, and we kind of are saying that with this cap and replace. So I mean,
Yeah, fair.
This is Janice Powers here. I just want to chip in. This is not about personal opinion. This is about what the Plan OKC provisions require or specify. This is not, I mean, we've had that discussion about whether they're a good idea or bad idea. The plan says what it says, and the policy is to reduce or eliminate them. So, I mean, I think that's the direction we're moving.
Yeah, I'm actually saying I'm fine with that. I think to me instead it's just if you say, streets of this many lanes at this much speed, in this environment can have billboards, then everything that fits that description should be able to have it. I don't know. I don't see exceptions to the quality of the experience.
Yeah, and I would say before we move to and Lisa, I think we'll probably need to get to the survey, to hit our time targets here. But I think we implicitly do that because freeways have the highest speed limits. They're the fastest, they're the ones where people travel the fastest. Local streets are where people travel the slowest, at least in their cars. And so what we're talking about here, we're talking about a specific kind of sign, which is a billboard. And so that'll be a separate category in the ordinance. And what we're saying is on those roads where people travel the fastest, that's where we allow these. And so we're not banning them there. We're attaching spacing requirements. Some cities do ban them. I'm working with several right now that do. And others, most of the communities that we identified and what we looked at with other cities around the country that are similar in size to Oklahoma City have spacing limits. And so on those, that in a sense, it implicitly does that. We can look, I think, in developing the regulations, I think that the travel speeds, the lane width that you're talking about, and the LUDAs, which kind of define the city's preferred long-term character in different parts of the city, are all brought to bear in deciding, what package of sign regulations we're going to have there. So I think in a way we're doing that. In terms of quantitative, these are all numbers, 1,200 square feet, there'll be a height, there'll be an area, set. So everybody will know what those rules are from the get-go. So I think implicitly they are. I think maybe you're wanting something more explicit or making that explicit in the findings and purpose statements and et cetera. So that's something we'll look at.
Hey, Mark, this is Todd Stone. If I could just make a comment real quick myself. I do kind of agree with them. I also have a problem with the cap and replace piece of that. Only because the city's always changing and expanding or retracting in certain areas. So to me, it makes sense that in some cases you might, especially when we talk about it being quantitative, with clearly defined areas, right? So if you have those clearly defined areas, why would cap and replace be even needed at that point?
What cap and replace does is allow the market over time to gradually reduce the number of billboards, which is something that the plan policies in Plan OKC call for the city to do. So, that's one, and because we can't by law amortize them, we can't tell them to go away, and I'm not saying that would be the same policy anyway.
OKC, the Plan OKC is a plan. At least that's how I view it. Is that, Jeff, do you view it as a policy or a plan? It's Plan OKC, right?
Plan is a policy.
Yeah, it's both. But yeah, you're right. It's a policy, and what we're trying to do is, with this process, and it is a little there's some gray area sometimes. But what we'd like to do is, we get kind of as much as we can, you know, the policy committee kind of give us the general direction, and then we come to this group and kind of refine it. Now, of course, that's, you know, it's a little bit, it can be tricky because, you know, Councilman Stone and the other council and planning commissioners that were on here, you weren't necessarily presented with this approach. This is kind of an interpretation that we gathered from when we spoke with you all. So, you know, this group is going to refine policy a little bit because we've got planning commissioners and city council members on it, and also help us refine the kind of the nitty-gritty details. So yeah, Councilman Stone, if you're, you know, obviously you're a policymaker, you're a city council member, you know, we're kind of asking you and the other council members on this to kind of represent the council. And I know that may be difficult because you don't, you know, without talking, that may be difficult because you're not the rest of the council. But, you know, this is kind of the process we have, and the hope is so that we can kind of make it easier as, you know, once it gets past the SAT, this group, the planning commission and the city council, you guys can kind of speak to it. You know, when it's the planning commission, Janice and Scott and let's see, who else have we got on here that's from the planning commission? They're the ones I'm seeing. Anyway, the planning, Asa, there's Asa. The planning commissioners can kind of discuss it with the planning commission and kind of give their thoughts, and the same when it goes to council. So what we do with this, what we anticipated doing with this poll is we say, okay, how does everybody feel about this, so that we can get everybody to participate. And if anybody has any reservations, they can say so, and they can even give us, you know, well, how about this? How about doing it differently? Or you can respond at some future point, and then we'll take all that feedback and develop something that the group is more comfortable with. And I know that, like, Councilman Stone, you and Mr. Cooper have kind of different opinions on the billboard. So we're trying to get something that, you know, ideally would be supportable by all the city council members on here. And if we can get there, that would be great.
When you say we have different philosophies on them, I guess, I mean, I'm just thinking about the last one or two issues we had with billboards, and one of them, Councilman Cooper didn't want in his ward, and I fully supported that. I'm trying to figure out if, I know from our standpoint, we want something enforceable, and we want something very clear cut, because otherwise it creates nightmares for us. So that's when I started hearing people talk about making sure it's quantitative, and then I realized, why would you need cap and replace if the guidelines are clear, unless the guidelines all of a sudden opened up a whole new industry out there that we didn't know was there. Does anyone know how many people in Oklahoma City work in this industry? Just out of curiosity.
It's a good question. Focus groups?
Not sure.
How many work in outdoor advertising?
Yes.
I do not know. There are not that many outdoor advertising companies, but I have no idea what their employment is.
Okay. I'm just trying to look at the impact from all angles. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Justin Booher here with Vital Outdoor Advertising. We're probably the smallest outdoor advertising company in the market. And we've been in business 16 years, and we've gone through this several times. We started out at 500-foot spacing. It moved to 1,000, then 1,200 spacing about 2007, 2008. And now you guys are talking about 1,500 feet in cap and replace. This will destroy any new company or small company from growing. I ask all of you to spend 4 to 8 hours and pretend that you're going to start a billboard company, and find me 5 locations on interstates or highways. You're not going to be able to do it. Spacing, zoning is already too strict for new growth. That's it.
I want to piggyback on what he just said. That was actually some of the comments that I had and wanted to get clarification in terms of when we say cap and replace. Has there been any consideration made to the economic impact that this will have? If I understand it correctly, this will completely eliminate, once you've reached the cap anyways, it'll completely eliminate any new market participants in this industry. Am I understanding that correctly?
Maybe yes and no. Basically what the cap means is once, and I would say, and like Mark said, we haven't proposed a cap yet. That would be the next step. But based on our existing, there really aren't a whole lot of more opportunities for billboards, even based on our existing spacing. And zoning, I'll include that because zoning is a key part of it. That's the reason, for example, that Hefner Parkway isn't full of billboards, because it's zoned residential for the most part along the entire length of it. And so that disallows billboards. And that's the reason for that. Would it disallow new companies coming in? I mean, there's nothing that we're doing favors or we're not controlling the market for billboards or the number of firms or anything like that. Certainly, yes, if you put a cap on it, or if you increase the spacing, yeah, it's going to make it more difficult to find a place for billboards. But and until we are told differently, this group is told differently by the city council, that's the direction we're going. And I think the question is how far do we go? And this group could say, well, you guys can say what you want, but we can look at those different methods and see if we want to tweak any of them, or if you think that combined they may be too much, or there's lots of ways we could go to tweak that approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that answers my question. I just want to leave the comment that I do think that there's a number of economic implications, just in terms of if you just look at price alone. I mean, if you have fewer participants in that industry, no ability for anybody new to enter that market, you're essentially eliminating competition. So that's just my thoughts on it.
This is Councilperson Cooper. And before I say what I'm going to say, I want to say that it's completely independent of what Marcus just said, and the previous speaker who mentioned the concerns from the small business side of things. I was going to say what I'm about to say, in other words, prior to what either one of these two individuals said. So this is not I do not intend this as a direct response to either of them. So I want to be very clear with that. Okay, so as we've been, experiencing this shelter in place, I've taken a bike ride daily for my mental health and my physical health. I can't go to the gym. I mean, I guess I could, but I'm not. But I bike every day at the end of the day to, again, stay in shape, but also for my mental well-being. And for the first week, I biked specifically around my neighborhood, the Paseo, Jefferson Park to the east of me, Douglas Edgemere, Central Park. And as I biked along Robinson from 23rd to Northwest 36th and saw that large wall that divides our neighborhoods from Interstate 235, I remembered the stories I heard knocking doors from folk with memories long enough to remember when the city made Robinson from downtown basically an expressway. And that was the further plan, was to take what we now know is a beautiful, almost boulevard when you look at 23rd between 28th Street, when you look at Robinson between 28th and 23rd. Today, it's beautiful. There's people playing tennis on tennis courts. There's parks with murals. There are families on walks, and those stories, that history that those neighbors in each one of those neighborhoods told me, it came back to my mind during those bike rides. Moreover, the only reason that that street today is not that sort of expressway is because everyday people, the neighbors in those neighborhoods, got active and voiced their concerns about having a speedway through their neighborhood. So that was in my mind. The next thing, as I was thinking about that history, was as I looked east, because you know Jefferson Park has each street where it dead ends into a cul-de-sac from like 25th, 6th, 7th, and there. And as you do that in that dead end, by the way, when I'm looking this way, it's because I'm in Passaic and I'm literally looking east where these streets are. When you do that, what do you see very often? But Interstate 235, excuse me, elevated. And as I looked over there, all I thought to myself was, my goodness, this is the site that these residents have, is an elevated interstate. No matter, the wall isn't tall enough not to see it. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could at least do some public art along those interstates so that when people are leaving to go to work in the morning or whenever they go to work and they look east from that cul-de-sac, they actually see something that says Jefferson Park or whatever, something beautiful. And this is not Fantasyland, because we know in Maps 4, the mayor's beautification project specifies the beautification of on-ramps and off-ramps for our interstates. And the specific area I'm talking about is pretty close to the off-ramp and on-ramp of I-235 from 23rd Street. So what I'm talking about is not fantasy level. I say all of this to say that I am completely in the camp of planokc, where it says we either reduce significantly the number of billboards or we eliminate them. I'm completely in that camp. And first and foremost, in these, in the urban core within the city, because I think for too long, just as once upon a time the city tried to make Robinson an expressway, for too long we've made too many of our arterial streets expressways. I've heard neighbor after neighbor, for instance, especially after the passing of that young man last year as he was riding his bike on Classen, that they want to see Classen Boulevard become a boulevard again. They want to see it actually be for pedestrians and people on bikes, and bringing back to the forefront of our minds that neighborhoods exist along Classen, that is not just a commuter expressway to get folk to downtown to back out wherever they're living. There are neighbors with families, there are neighbors without families, and they believe in walkability and bikeability and slowing things down here in the urban core. And when I hear these conversations, not just limited to this particular meeting, but just conversations in general about, well, the higher speed roads, we need to have longer billboards out there. No, we don't. We don't. And again, I keep quoting, and I'm gonna quote it, even if I lose this battle, I'm never gonna stop quoting it. But Fahrenheit 451, a critically acclaimed novel, science fiction novel, warned us that there would come a day where we would do exactly what I've heard articulated in this conversation, which is, well, the faster the road, the longer the billboards need to become. You know, I'm not a big fan of interstates, number one, and anybody who's read Color of Law knows why. Number two, thinking about the turnpike, and this is to Joel's point, yeah, you know, if someone's paying on that turnpike and they're seeing on either side of them a lot of beautiful trees and just there's scenery there. I don't think we need to be putting in giant advertising signs along the turnpike, whether they were paying for it or not. And I don't think they need to be doing on those interstates. And I guess my bottom line is to make sure I articulate this, the interstates were a mistake. And all we have to do is look at our public health records when we look at obesity and everything that's associated with what happens when we become stationary in our cars, and that we use our cars to do every last little bit there is a real consequence for the way we have constructed too many of our American cities. There's a real health consequence, both physical and mental. And billboards are part of that, because what they do is they remind us to consume and eat and move and go and always be on the go and keep going and keep going and keep eating and keep consuming, and never to slow down, never to slow down, never to slow down, and to take in the beauty that is a walk, the beauty that is our neighborhoods, the beauty that is in just taking one's time to move about this world. So, you know, yeah, I think we're going to get lost in the weeds if we start talking about quantitative and let's go and look at this, that, and the other. I think we just say the plan all along was eliminating or dramatically reducing. So that's it. And again, if anyone is on the other side of this particular argument, I would really ask for them to come talk to the people in Jefferson Park who are over the age of 60 and 70, who remember when they fought to keep Jefferson Park from becoming an expressway, similar to what we now talk about I-235 and the Turnpike. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this has been just fantastic discussion. I think I will launch our first poll. One, I want to test that it works. And two, I hope we can squeeze in some discussion on one other topic. But as has been explained at various points, this is not the last time that the SAT sees any of this information or gets an opportunity to weigh in on it. So with that, so our first poll has 4 different questions, and they are, so you should be seeing a poll on your screen. Raise your hand if you are not seeing it and turn on your video. But there are four questions to this one poll. One is whether or not what you think of the concept of prohibiting billboards everywhere but freeways. Second part is how do you feel about the cap and replace system? Third is what do you think of the concept of applying the spacing requirements to both sides of the road instead of one? And then the last question is how you feel about continuing to prohibit billboards in the scenic highway area and potentially extend that zone to Hefner Parkway and parts of other freeways. So again, this is not a vote, and we're not just going to take the highest voting direction, but it will help staff gauge how everyone's perspective and allow us an opportunity to follow up later.
And if I could add, so if we could have only the SAT members vote, I'm not sure if everybody.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I did mean to say I'm asking only SAT members to vote, not members of the public and not staff.
And we won't be able to see, when we take this vote right now, we won't be able to see who's voting what. So our intent is to use this system going forward in this and future meetings. And, we can refine it as time goes on, but our intent was kind of so that everybody has a say, especially because of the difficulty of these, online meetings. It's not ideal. We'd of course much rather be doing this in person. But we felt like this would be a way to help everybody stay involved and make sure that their voice is heard. And if you do answer something like, it needs improvement, or I don't like it, we would ideally, well, not ideally, we want to hear from you. Ideally, we would have liked to hear that and discuss everybody's concerns in the meeting, but it's clear that, we've had a great discussion and it's hard to pack that in. So if you, like, for example, I think we've taken all the time we can on billboards, but if you don't like it, or if it needs improvement, or if you have any ideas at all, please either email us, or, and Lisa, correct me if I'm misstating how you want to communicate, how you want the group to communicate. but I believe we can also use the Microsoft Teams chat function, and that's available at any time. And that's the whole
Yeah.
group.
Yeah, we'll accept your input in any format. If you want to text, phone call, email,
Yeah,
I
whenever you
was going
want.
to say, except for maybe Twitter. I just say, a format that allows us to engage in dialogue and not just outputs, but inputs is what I would.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
Of the first poll questions, prohibit billboards everywhere but freeways. Is there going to be one that just says prohibit billboards everywhere?
No, there's 4 questions, and one is not prohibit them everywhere.
So if my preference would be to prohibit billboards everywhere, should I answer needs improvement, or should I gulp hard and put like it?
I would say that's either a needs improvement or can live with it. So sounds like you might be leaning towards needs improvement, and then you could just send us an email or say so that, I'd prefer to have, just ban them or whatever it is that you're thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff makes a good point. I'll leave I know everybody's thinking through the poll, but I'll end the polling here in a minute and you'll be able to see the results on your screen. But Jeff brings up a good point. You'll notice one of the options is not love it. This is public decision making. Love it is hardly ever an option. I mean, can you live with it? I mean, we all circulate in a world where not everything is to our perfect desires. But is it good enough? Can we live with it? So that was purposeful. So I think just about.
I'm having a difficult time. This is Councilman Cooper. I'm having a difficult time scrolling down past the second question. Oh, wait. Yep. I saw something.
Yeah, there's a little toolbar. There's a little slide bar. It's hard to see.
Yeah, it's a little gray bar off to the right.
Is that working for you, Councilman? Do you see that?
It shows up and then it goes away. There it is. Found it. Thank you so much.
Let me know when you're finished and I will publish it. Okay, I am going to end the poll. If we didn't capture anybody, we'll capture them after this. But when I end the poll, you should be able to, everybody should be able to see. Can everybody see the results of the poll? Oh, wait, I got to share results. I got to share results.
Ah,
now, can everybody see the results? Just briefly, you guys are an opinionated bunch, but it looks like we, that we're on the right track with some things, and some things, specifically maybe the billboard prohibition, maybe we need to drill down more into that.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you very much. This is perfect. And again, encourage those of you who have reservations, whether they're strong or just kind of mediocre. Please do contact us or just go to Microsoft Teams and that way the whole group can see. If you want to converse with the group after the meeting, in writing, we can certainly do that. But please do let us know, what it is. Maybe you don't necessarily have to have a specific idea like how to improve it. That would be great if you do. But if you just want to say, I'm not comfortable with this aspect of it, then that would be appreciated. Or you don't have to. If you just say, if it's just, I don't like it, that's fine too.
Okay, it is 3:30, and I want to make sure we get to public comment. Jeff and Mark, what do you think about skipping the pole sign, since it's kind of related to what we just discussed?
Yeah, we can skip that probably.
And we'll come back to PUDs in another meeting.
Sure. Yeah, we'll be talking about zoning districts too in future SAT meetings, and it's kind of tied to that.
So Mark, you see the pole sign slide?
Yes. Do you want to discuss that, or do you want to skip over?
I thought we might be able to hit it real quick.
Okay.
Because it's related, to me, it's somewhat related to the billboard discussion.
Okay. All right. And just, I'll try to be as quick as I can here. You know, the sign you see on the left image there is what's called a pole sign. Those are mounted on usually a metal pole that's a lot skinnier than the sign area itself. One of the advantages of these signs for folks, or one of the advantages of not regulating them or banning them or anything, is obviously that's maximum flexibility for businesses and people who want to display them, as well as the sign companies, which is a good thing. On the other hand, they're not when the community did its community appearance survey, and in other places I've worked, it's not the kind of sign that people in the general public like as much. It's also becoming less common, I think. I think you see, and this even came up with stakeholders when we're talking, that I think most, even the industry people who do on-premise signs, usually nowadays do monument signs instead of pole signs. And so our approach, because the billboard would basically be the only kind of pole signs, is those would be allowed on freeways, depending on our approach to the survey today, where I think that was probably one of the less beloved of our approaches. Another approach is to encourage, or even require, if the signs are altered, to require pole covers. And that's something that would cover up, it's like the image on the right. If you tore the skin off of that sign, it'd be a metal pole, but they covered it up with a masonry cladding that makes it look like, I think, the building on the other side of it. And so that's a way to, we're looking at maybe incentives to encourage that, like not counting pole sign covers, towards sign area, and creating, just ways to encourage people to do that, and to bring their signs into a more 21st century looking sign package. And so, next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Please. If we go to the next slide. I see more and more communities. There are 4 on our list of larger communities that explicitly don't allow pole signs anymore, including the one I live in. A lot of communities in the Kansas City area, for example, just don't allow them. The Denver area as well, where we've been doing a lot of work. But communities who don't do that often will look at ways to encourage pole covers. For example, Edmond, for example, requires pole covers, and in some instances, they just have to take on the same architectural character of the buildings on the same site. In other instances, in more highly regulated areas of the city, they actually require masonry covers, which is, obviously an expense for business. We recognize that, but visually, it produces a better character for the community around it. So Lisa, you want to, I don't know if anybody has any quick questions. You want to do the survey that you had for that one?
Yeah, does anyone have any quick questions? I think we covered a lot of these concepts under billboards, but we'll pause a minute if people have some informational questions about what we're talking about.
I have just kind of a quick question. It may be that this isn't something that really applies to where we are right now, but there are a number of places in Oklahoma City, in the older areas, especially, where there are pole signs that are in place and that are sort of appropriate for the era in which the business was constructed. And so I certainly would want there to be some mechanism by which, I mean, on the one hand, I'd love to see every business that goes out of business have to take their sign with them. And therefore, we would eventually have the opportunity to get everybody compliant with the current sign code. But there are businesses almost, when you use the term historic, you get into issues and problems, but that have, signs that have sort of always been there. And I would hate to see us regulate those out of existence because I think they add a certain character or flavor to the vicinity where they exist. Are we making any allowances for those here, or is that something that would have more to do with, I don't know, enforcement and that sort of thing?
All right, well, state law prohibits us from requiring those to come down anyway. So those can stay up as long as they want. And I guess depending on what you're talking about and depending on the specifics of how we set this up and how we create either incentives or, and actually if this is tied totally to incentives, then the business could keep it up forever and they would just get extra concessions, I guess, if they covered the pull. Otherwise, if you want to keep that sign the way it is, we'd have to look at, and I guess we could talk in more detail later, maybe about the areas where you see signs like that and how we would keep those in place. And I'm sure there's something we could do either by area or by policy or some standards in the ordinance to allow signs like that to continue.
Hey,
Okay,
two quick questions.
The answers that I would give then to this poll, this portion of the poll would not include those kinds of signs, but other kinds of pole signs.
We're just testing, 30,000 feet right now.
Two quick questions. How many signs do this affect that exist now? And the only other comment I'd make is that, covering a sign pole does not necessarily make the sign better looking.
So how many would it affect? I think the answer is none, because there's the existing ones, would have the right to stay there. Unless that was.
Well, that's my question though, Jeff. How many that are there, if they were torn down, you couldn't put back up?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So how many are there that if the business went away or, they decided to redo their sign for whatever reason, then they would need to comply with this. And, how many pole signs are there? I don't know that we would even be able to find that information out. There are thousands and thousands of them. But most of them are built to last a long time. And, most people, obviously you probably know this better than I, Jim, how long a pole sign is up, but they're built to last a long time. And so
So if the business changed, but they kept the sign up, you could keep the sign? If that Pizza Hut in the picture turned out to be a dispensary, they could keep the sign and change the sign face?
Maybe Marilyn or Mark would better. I'm a little, as far as the changeover, I'd have to consult the code personally to see how that works.
They're currently allowed to. I mean, today somebody would be allowed to without even getting a permit.
Yeah, you just
how we can address that going forward, I'll pitch that to Mark.
I think
again, that's how we address it in the future is a policy issue. I mean, we can keep the regulations the way they are today and just allow the business to change and keep the sign that they have. Obviously, that's one approach. Or, there are communities that say you change your business, you change your sign if it's non-conforming. So if that's where the stakeholder team wants to go, we can certainly look at that. Or we could keep this the way it is, or we could create incentives for pole covers. I know Mr. Perrick doesn't think that's an improvement visually. It'd be interesting to hear from if that's the what most people here think, or if that's
I
even the
agree.
direction we want to go.
This is Joel Dixon again. I think it's beneficial to couch this discussion, especially with regard to pole signs, kind of on whether the business and the sign itself is on a street or if it's on a road. And I think it's important for us to define what we mean by street versus road, because we tend in the vernacular to use those terms interchangeably, but they actually mean two very different things. A street is a place that connects people and businesses and activity for humans so that we can build wealth in a community. So your home is on a street, your local, business, for example, in the Paseo, and I'm going to lean a little heavily on my councilman's language because, well, we live in the same neighborhood pretty much. Those businesses are connected by a street, whereas a road is really, it brings two distant places together, So when I commute to my office in Edmond, I'm taking roads to get from one place connected by a bunch of streets to another. And I think it's important for us to understand that the streets are for human activity that build commercial wealth, whereas roads allow those humans to get between places of activity. And so when we think about signage, I think it's important to know where the signs are located and where the businesses are located. If they're located on a street, a pole sign doesn't really make sense. It's not to a human scale. I mean, if I'm walking past that Pizza Hut sign, it doesn't tell me anything. I'm looking up several stories to try and read what that is. I'm probably not even going to see it or be able to understand it. Whereas if it's on a road, then maybe a pole sign makes more sense, because now we're more at an automobile scale, not at a human scale, because roads are for cars and streets are for people. I think if we keep that frame of reference in mind while we're discussing this, it can help inform how we make decisions about some of these different signs and policies that we're evaluating.
Thanks for that input. And that's something we discussed, and the earlier that was brought up, I think, from several people from several different points of view, even about the functions that streets and roads, however we classify them, serve, and the sign package that goes with them. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I want to interrupt for a minute and invite Troy Schweinberg from Metro Signs. He asked to speak on pole signs. So I wanted to make sure we have his comments in this discussion. So Troy, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Yes, I am in industry. I have sat in a few of the industry discussions. I just wanted to point out a couple things. So the information on this slide, if we can go back to kind of the one that compares peers communities. So Edmond does not require masonry for their pole covers. They do have a 30% sign face requirement, but they do not require masonry. The only community in the metro area that requires masonry is War Acres, and Tulsa does allow pole signs. So those are some misnomers in there. And I would also put into it that I think it's more of a freedom that a lot of my customers would put more decorative pole covers if they weren't restricted by it. So it's not so much about forcing it as it is about lifting that restriction, which is currently in place. So currently you're not allowed, you have to count the pole cover as square footage. So, no business owner is going to take up their advertising message to beautify the sign. And pole covers do improve the aesthetics of the sign and the function of the sign, which is why people do them. So, it's not so much around forcing people to as much as around allowing them, the ability to. Nobody that I have as a customer wants to make an eyesore. They're forced to make an eyesore sometimes based upon, how it's done. They want to be physically appealing, and height of sign has a lot to do with kind of how that goes, but it's not so much a pole sign. Even monument signs have poles in them. So, to use that vernacular, freestanding sign and monument sign. Monument is described by the base of the sign being more than half the width of the widest part of the sign. So again, I think some of the definitions that are going into here are some trap doors that you guys are going to run into. And I can tell you that Del City has ran into that trap door with saying that a monument sign can't have a pole. Then you start to build, unstable signs and have issues with that. So some of the terminology that's being used here is gonna be in trouble with that. But I did want to just point out, as I read over this, some of the issues that were in the slides.
Okay, and I think if you look at Edmund's regulations, and I don't know, maybe they changed them recently. They don't require masonry everywhere. It's just for some types of development. It's tied to size and other things. So
very similar.
There is a reference to masonry pole covers. There are some situations where they vary things depending on whether your pole covers masonry or just similar to the building. So that was the point made there.
I would point to Oklahoma City, and Councilman Cooper, you live in Paseo District. So Paseo District has way different sign codes than Oklahoma City in general. So, material types, things like that fit the area. So overlays and things happen all over the place. So I think I'm just saying that slide makes it look like Edmond requires masonry. They don't. They have overlays and PUDs and SPUDs just like Oklahoma City does for materials, but they do not in their sign code have anything that requires masonry. But
War Acres does. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they vary size by materials. They don't require it.
Correct.
Yeah.
They don't count pole cover square footage.
Right. Thanks, Troy. I appreciate that information.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, guys.
You bet.
Okay, any other quick questions? Maybe we can squeeze in another poll. Polls are fun.
The poll.
Yeah, exactly. No pun. Okay, well, let's do this final poll, and then we'll go over where we're going to next before we adjourn. Okay, so I've launched the new poll. You should see it on your screen now. There are two questions in this poll. One is to see how you feel about allowing new pole signs on freeway, only allowing new pole signs on freeways. And the other is what everyone's opinion on pole cover. Okay, we'll give everybody another 30 seconds to finish the poll. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and then I'll share the results so everyone can see them. So on only allowing new pole signs on freeways, that does not seem very popular, although a lot of people look like they could live with it and like it. Could someone share real quick why they don't like it? Like, is that because you don't think there should be anyway, they shouldn't be on freeways, or?
I'll chime in.
This is Todd Stone. My insight on that is I think there are particular areas where it's hugely predominantly pole signs. And if someone is coming into that area, I would think that keeping a pole sign in that area, I don't know why we wouldn't let them do that.
Okay, thank you. Clay, you wanted to.
Yeah, thank you.
Same thing.
Well, my big thing is, I just think, you guys keep referring to Edmond, and I do a lot of business in Edmond, and I just think you should keep in mind that all the car dealerships out there that are in Oklahoma City on Broadway Extension, they're not in Edmond. A lot of people think they are, and the reason they're not in Edmond is because of the restrictive sign ordinance of Edmond. Furthermore, Walgreens will not even look at Edmond. I know that for a fact because they have those, they will not allow the flashing sign panel, the electric sign. That's my only point is, these companies have to advertise, and they're going to go where they can advertise. So, everybody wants sales tax, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's keep that in mind. I mean, that's the other side of this coin. And those are my comments. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, thanks, Clay.
Yeah. And again, if those who, the needs improvements and the don't like it, so we appreciate your, I know we're out of time today, but we certainly appreciate, your feedback and any ideas you might have to improve what we're proposing.
Okay, we're gonna skip. So we will have to schedule another time to get through the rest of our questions, particularly the one about PUDs and SPUDs. I do want to, before we adjourn, make sure if there are any other members of the public who want to comment who haven't had an opportunity. Troy was the only person on my list of requests, but anyone else who would like to speak, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell us what you have to say.
Lisa, while
Yeah.
this Janice Powers again, while we're waiting for somebody to unmute themselves and speak, I'll just say, virtually every issue we touch on is so dependent upon the issue of enforcement. And I think I mentioned this last time, I'll mention it again today. I'm sure I'll mention it again the next time we meet. How we are going to, enforce these things and our political will to enforce them, how we're going to fund that, how we're going to come up with a system that actually works. It's just going to be integral. I think, we can spend all the time and energy in the world going through this process. If we're not going to have a sign code that we actually enforce, then, it's all just for naught. So my 2 cents, I can't stand it. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Any public members? Okay, so I guess I will try to identify a time for us all to reconvene about some of the other issues. Our goal is to get a draft of the sign code for review as soon as we can, but we want to make sure that we've captured everyone's concerns thoroughly before we do that. So that'll be several weeks from now. And then again, we're hoping to be through design committees, planning commission, and sometime in the fall with the final draft so that we can adopt any changes by the end of 2020. But again, you know, as important as the schedule is, it's more important that we get something that's correct. So any final comments, Mark or Jeff?
No, I just want to say I appreciate everybody's time and your candid input. That's the kind of thing we need in putting a draft together. So it's been very helpful. I appreciate your thoughts and your participation.
Yep, I'll echo that. Thank you again. And I'll sound like a broken record, but we really would appreciate any suggestions you have, and we'll figure out a way to kind of, you know, best kind of, whether it's through Microsoft Teams or some way to kind of get kind of maybe revised proposals out to the group to, well, how about this, you know, try and minimize the amount of mail we send you, but we're learning as we go. I think as we get further along, we'll, you know, I think this went really well, the polling, in my opinion, and we had great discussions, so that's much appreciated. It's great to hear the different views, both sides and everything in between, so much appreciated.
Okay, with that, I will call us adjourned and we'll see everybody next time. Thank you.
Hey, Lisa, I have a question really quick. I mean, no, you can obviously adjourn. I waited till afterward. Okay. I just didn't see where removing the murals from the sign ordinance and discussing decorative building paint is, I don't see that anywhere. Is that already happening? And that's kind of why that's not included in the SAT focus?
It is, it's been captured in the list of things to address. I believe there's broad support for it, so we didn't think we needed a focused SAT discussion on it.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. The building decorative paint comes up a lot, and and it's basically unresolved for many small business owners, and so I want to make sure that that is excluded from the sign allowance on someone's building in the new sign code.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we heard from various focus groups and other pieces of information. There seems to be broad support to not consider it good. To make it more flexible, and you should see that addressed in the draft.
Okay, that's what I had assumed, but I felt like I needed to say it. So Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Bye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.